All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Zabata, and I'm a proud JWU alumna and the Director of Alumni Relations at Johnson & Wales University. Thank you for joining us for today's session, Attending Events After COVID-19, What to Expect. We're excited to bring this program to you and look forward to this interesting discussion related to the experiences of a few of our alumni. Before we get started, I'd like to review a couple of housekeeping items. If you have a question for the panelists, please add it to the Q&A section. These questions will be asked of the panel at the conclusion of the program. We'll get to as many as time allows. The chat feature can be used to message other attendees privately or publicly. This section is located at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to thank the Alumni Relations team for their help behind the scenes of today's session, especially Liza Gentile, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations, and JWU alumna for her work to bring this program to us. Thank you. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Lee Esckilsen, Associate Professor within the College of Hospitality Management. Professor Esckilsen is in his 18th year at Johnson & Wales. He conducts research and teaches venue management, operations management, event management, safety, security, and risk management, ticketing and access management, and ancillary services and revenue management. Professor Esckilsen has been involved in the development and management of public assembly venues for the past 30 years. During his venue management career, he has generated more than $150 million in revenue, booked and successfully managed more than 1,500 entertainment and sports events, negotiated and implemented more than 1,000 event contracts, 20 labor union contracts, 10 professional and collegiate sports tenant agreements, and 3 naming rights agreements. He created Entertainment and Sports Consulting LLC, doing business as ES Venues, which specializes in the development and management of entertainment and sports venues and events. Clients have included Delaware North, Venue Solutions Group, Venue Works, and numerous municipalities. He's also co-authored 3 textbooks. He holds a Bachelor of Education degree from Bowling Green State University and a Master of Science degree from Indiana University. Thank you for leading today's discussion, Professor Esckilsen. I'll turn it over to you. Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are muted.
That on purpose. There we go. I guess I'll need to start over again. My apologies. Thank you, Lori, and good afternoon to everyone. We have assembled a great alumni panel today to discuss one of the most surreal issues of our lifetime and probably the most significant issue in the history of the sports and entertainment business that impacts the way we attend live events in the future. In 2018, the North American sports market had a value of about $71 billion. The figure was expected to rise to $83 billion by 2023. This was published in the Statista magazine, December 10, 2019. The global value of the sports industry was estimated to be $471 billion in 2018, an increase of 45% since 2011. And before coronavirus stopped play, the trajectory seemed to be upwards. This was published in the World Economic Forum by Stephen Hall, 2020. The impact that the pandemic will have on the sports business is difficult to project, but it will certainly be in double-digit billions of dollars. The global music industry is worth over $50 billion, with 2 major income streams. The first, live music, makes up 50% of total revenues and is derived mainly from sales of ticket sales to live performances. And second, from recorded music. Again, the World Economic Forum, Stephen Hall. The impact that this pandemic will have on the concert business is also difficult to project, but it will certainly also be in the double-digit billions of dollars. Finally, based on my research, some of the significant changes that the sports and entertainment spectators may experience as we go back to live events, depending on the venue and the event, will be the need to wear masks, sitting in socially distanced seating, and purchasing prepackaged food and beverages. The experience will also be touchless, and cleaning crews will be visible everywhere. Now I would like to introduce our panel of alumni experts. First, Marshall Freeman, 2006 Chief Operating Officer of the Atlanta Police Foundation. Good afternoon, Marshall. Kenneth
Good
Gaber,
afternoon.
2006 as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Vice President of Operational Excellence from Delaware North Companies. Good afternoon, Kenneth.
Nope.
Allison Pangakis, 2008, Operations Manager, Newport Festivals Foundation. Good afternoon, Allison.
Fine.
And last but certainly not least, Gwen Sieck, 2015, Ticket Sales and Hospitality Representative from the Baltimore Ravens of the NFL. Good afternoon, Gwen.
Hello, Professor.
Now I would like each one of the panelists to introduce themselves and their current position and tell us a little bit about what their daily lives are like in their position and maybe a little bit about what this change since the pandemic hit has been like. We'll start with Marshall.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Marshall Freeman, Chief Operating Officer of the Atlanta Police Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization located in Atlanta, Georgia. And here I lead the safety and security strategy for the city of Atlanta. And we have tons of events that are all revolved around creating a safer city for our residents. And so we build youth centers, do tons of community events and programming all throughout the city. Prior to joining the Atlanta Police Foundation, I actually served as the president and CEO of Creative Music Group, an organization that I actually founded following my graduation at Johnson & Wales at the North Miami campus. And so my last 12 years prior to here have included personal management, production management, tour management, and promoter repping for recording artists. And so my work has included working for folks like Aretha Franklin, did work with Joan Rivers, Betty Wright, Boston, a little bit of everybody. And then also, once we kind of circle around back to here in Atlanta, I sat on the safety and security commission for the Super Bowl 53, which was not long ago. So happy to be here with you guys today.
Marshall, thank you, and welcome again. Ken?
My name is Ken Gaber. Hello, everyone. I graduated in the class of 2006. I currently work for Delaware North Sports Service. In my current role, there's many things now due to the environment we're in. But my main jobs currently are I'm building out 6 brand new venues across the United States and the UK. The Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. It's going to be the 32nd NHL hockey team. Newly announced today, just a few hours ago, the UBS Arena, which is where the New York Islanders will play. A small arena in Savannah, about 8,000 people. The Moody Center in Austin, Texas, which will hold University of Texas basketball, as well as a ton of concerts. Palm Springs Arena, which is another about 10 to 11,000 concert venue. And then over in Manchester, UK, it's going to be about a 24,000 person concert venue, probably one of the best in the world. So I'm in charge of all that, building it out, designing it, trying to figure out how to make it work in this new environment. And then as well, I'm in charge of all of the COVID plans, resumption plans for all of Delaware North Sports Service. So 64 to 65 venues. We're hoping to have good news with baseball starting tomorrow and the 24th with fans. It looks like it's going to get definitely pushed back, hopefully between August 7th and 10th, and then, NFL hopefully starting on opening day. So thank you for having me.
Ken, thank you again and welcome. Allison, next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Pangakis, and I'm a class of 2008 graduate of Johnson & Wales. I took a little bit of a unique career path and freelanced full-time while in school and after school, working for corporate meeting planning companies, decor, entertainment, rentals. Kind of took that experience and apply it now to working for 3 or 4 companies that I still do. So I work for Classic Conferences, which is a corporate meeting planning company. We produce large-scale national sales meetings, incentive meetings, where I mostly manage the food and beverage. So I'm working with the hotel and working with the chefs to be on budget, to create the menus and take care of any dietary needs. I also work for a company called XPL, which is out of Boston, which does some really creative stage experience and production. We helped to produce the opening ceremony of the Special Olympics just a few years ago in Seattle. I am one of the site managers for the Gloria Gemma Breast Cancer Foundation Flames of Hope event that takes place in Providence towards the end of the water fire season and with water fire in October. And then finally, I am the operations manager for the Newport Folk and Jazz Festival. It takes place every year in Newport, Rhode Island for the past 65 and 60 years, 65 for jazz, 60 for folk. And my role there is to turn Fort Adams State Park into the concert venue that everybody knows it to be. So throughout the year, working with food vendors, craft vendors, rental equipment, tents, and then going on site with a crew of about 50 to place those tents, place those vendors, lay out the fencing, working with the signage team for directionals. And then that way, once production, sponsorship, and some of the other vendors get on site, we're there to just manage daily operations, put out small fires, as we call them, throughout the festival.
Great, Allison. Thank you again and welcome again. Last again, but certainly not least, Gwen.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. I graduated from Johnson & Wales in 2015 from the SEAM program. During my time there, I was able to have an internship with the Washington Wizards, which really solidified my love for wanting to be in sports. That was for a summer in their sales and events program. I also interned at a PR firm in New York City during my college career. So that set me up to get the Ravens internship straight out of Johnson & Wales, and I joined the ticket office. So I was on the service side of ticketing. When I actually joined the Ravens, they didn't have any ticket sales people. We mainly just sold hospitality that kind of sold itself. So there wasn't a big need for a sales rep when I joined. And I was on the service side for 3 years. I oversaw the accessible seating in the stadium, which it was an amazing learning experience, and getting to work with people with special needs and making sure they had everything they needed to come to the games and enjoy them just like everybody else. And then 2 years ago, I transitioned over to the ticket sales and hospitality rep. That's the role I've been in for the past 3 seasons. I love it. And it's been so much fun, especially last season when we had our best franchise record. So it's just been awesome. Obviously, COVID has completely changed my job role. I'm now completely remote. We are selling very much down the line. We're already selling stuff for 2021. So looking forward to talk about COVID and what to expect on this.
Thank you, Gwen, and welcome. As you can see, all 4 of our alumni have represented the university extremely well, and we're very happy to have them today and take some time out of their busy schedule. So thank you again, panel. So let's start off. How do you think the pandemic will change the guest experience at sports and entertainment venues, events in the future? Let's start off with Gwen.
Yeah, I think so for us, and many of you guys, if any of you guys follow what's happening in sports, as Ken alluded to earlier, so baseball and basketball are getting ready to start this process. I think the NFL is thrilled that other leagues are starting, so we can hopefully learn from them. As of right now, the league has told every team that they can dictate how many people they will have, so their own capacity, which is really interesting because that means that you could go to a full stadium in Florida and then go to Philly where there's no fans allowed. The governor has already shut that down. So as of right now, we're building a plan of what we hope to present to the state of Maryland, and we hope that we'll be able to offer a limited capacity. At first, we thought it would be 14,000. Now we're actually talking about 7,000 to 10,000 fans. So the seating bowl is one of the easiest places where we could socially distance. You sell in blocks of tickets. You can't buy any less. You can't buy any more. It's 2, 4, 6, whatever the block is. You zip tie every seat that is not in use. And that would force people to have to sit in the assigned seat locations. But the issue is obviously, okay, we're going to require masks. So you have to set up a perimeter 100 feet from the stadium gates, handing out masks, telling people that they need to put them on. We're going to have a health questionnaire. So if people try to bring up their tickets on Ticketmaster, it's not going to allow the ticket to pop up until you fill out that questionnaire. So again, the seating bowl isn't really the concern. It's the gates for security. People get really crammed in there, and then it's going to the bathroom and getting food. All of that is really the tough part in our stadium, at least, because obviously it wasn't built with this in mind. So that's going to be something that we, the Ravens, will have to prove to our city and the state if they are happy with how we can keep everybody hopefully apart, even if it's only 7,000 in the building.
Gwen, great information. Thank you very much. Allison, tell us about festivals and events in the future.
Sure. So along with your typical things, your mask wearing and your physical distancing, of course, in lines, I do anticipate with something like our merch booths or with merch booths in general, there'll be less trying on. There'll probably be some plexiglass. There may be some pre-purchasing where you pick up, be open for sale at a certain time. And that might be the same for food too. So the way that our festival works, and many outdoor festivals do, is rows of food vendors, food trucks. And what does that look like now spatially? And do we have to space those more out for the lines? Or can we maybe work against those lines with some of those trucks and things, taking some online ordering, maybe even doing some type of delivery like you can do at the airport? You can order from your terminal, someone's running your food to you. So looking at that piece for guest experience, because I think it's our responsibility as event managers to still give people this incredible experience, and it needs to feel safe, but it doesn't want to feel too strict. So we want them to wander about, but we're also going to have to do some of the one-way aisles and potentially whatever we can do for less lines, including at the bars. And does that mean for us making our drinking space larger? Are there time frames or a time limit to which you can stay at them, which there is not now? And kind of keeping people on a flow where previously it was a little bit of a free-for-all. You showed up, you're there for 9 hours, you do what you want. And I think I see some structure to that in some way that doesn't impose on their experience, but also gives some structure and safety feeling to all of those fans, which for us is 10,000 a day.
Awesome, great. Thank you very much for that information. Marshall, I have a two-pronged question for you. Tell us a little bit about what you think the guest experience will like when they go back to concerts, whether it's a 5,000 or 6,000 seat arena concert or a 20,000 seat arena concert. And then also tell us a little bit about your community events and what the experience is like going to community events these days.
Yeah, I think the community events and the concerts, I think, are kind of, they're all going to start to do the same kind of similar things that Gwen and Allison both spoke about. So I think obviously the social distancing, the sanitation and all that stuff and capacity part of it is going to be a big part of the conversation. But I think that, when we looked at the last couple of weeks, the first event that NASCAR had, they were able to bring into, that stadium in Tennessee, 20,000 guests. And what they did that was unique from my perspective was that they had everybody to sign these liability waivers. And so I think that what we're going to see now is start a trend that's starting where they're going to try to push the liability off on the actual guest that is saying, hey, you're coming into this facility and you are assuming the actual risk when as it relates to COVID. But I do think that there's a second part of the guest conversation and the guest experience that I think about when we talk about the actual recording artists and the folks that are also, they are essentially a guest that is now, coming into an arena. And so I think there's going to be a whole different set of expectations, of regulations and things that we're going to see that's also going to shift the guest experience on the recording artist side of it, the people that are actually touring and doing these concerts. They're likely going to start to, to mandate, brand new equipment, versus using, rental gear, from rental houses. They're going to want to know, what practices and policies are in place as it relates to the safety and security. And I think they're also going to be a big part of pushing what is happening in all of these venues as it relates to safety and security.
Great. Ken, as we know, when we go to public assembly venues and events, one of the significant parts of that experience is food and beverage. Tell us a little bit about what you think the food and beverage experience will be like when people start to go back to venues and events.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be kind of two different phases. It's going to be, what we see when we first start going back, and then what we see in the future as we start to build out the venues of the future. So, when we first go back, you're going to see a lot of initial technology to, get temperatures and everything else. But you're going to see a lot of things kind of shut down and a change and kind of fixed in a way that makes it COVID proof, but doesn't really have a great guest experience. So for example, in clubs where over the past 5 or 10 years, we've been creating these all-inclusive clubs and great food and food everywhere. And you can help yourself and eat all day long. We're going to go back to the suite environment where it's more 16-person, 12-person suites opposed to large open spaces with all this food. You're going to see inside of kind of those spaces where it's all you can eat, either we're going to limit the style of service to, plated meals, or you're going to have people helping you out every corner. You may have to put on gloves. As you go to the concession stands, there's going to be less food items. So we're not going to have a ton of food items everywhere like we've had in the past, because our goal is to kind of move the lines as fast as possible. One of the worst things about, concessions and food and beverage in large venues is the line queuing. So as we look at the venues of the future, that's literally the main thing we're focusing on. Stuff like hydration stations where you can get your own refills, those would probably go away. Anything where you have high touch points, we're definitely looking at those each individually and how we can improve it. One of the biggest things is kind of the vending, the hawkers in the stand that, kind of run up and down. And if you go to Fenway, that's part of the baseball game, or, Patriots, that's part of the football game. You're probably going to see less and less of vendors, because the thought of just passing your food down the aisle or passing a drink down the aisle is going to be faux pas. And then as well as, really not accepting cash anymore in most of our venues. Some of our venues have already gone to 85, 90% cashless. You're going to see way more venues go 100% cash free.
Great. Ken, thank you very much. Great information. So let's talk about, we're in a transition now, and eventually, hopefully after a vaccine and after the industry comes to grips with what are the things that they're going to need to do with their event to make it sanitary and safe and clean. What do you think the new normal will be? Once we get back to letting people into live sports and entertainment, what do you think the new normal will feel like? And I'm happy to start off with anybody. Who would like to go first? Allison, why don't you go first? What does the new normal look like once we transition through this period of time and we get back to more normal times?
Sure. So, of course, it's a bit tough to say. And I think that's one of the things anyone in the industry keeps thinking of. And it's almost constantly changing. We're thinking we're getting closer to something, then it's kind of falling off. And we're now seeing these events start to happen on a larger scale, and we can do a lot of learning from those. So I'm excited for that in my role of a festival that's obviously been canceled for this year. Going into next year, we're outdoors, so we have a lot of advantages in that sense. But some of the things that are going to look different is the site itself. It's going to be more spread out. We are at Fort Adams, which is on a peninsula. That is not something that I can change. I can't add property to that. But I think our setup itself is going to have to look a lot more different and give people that space to feel like they are social distancing, and to maybe put down blankets and kind of separate themselves that way. One of the new normals that we mentioned is, eliminating these touch points, these refillable water bottle stations, reusable straws, reusable bags. All of that stuff, in my opinion, is going to slowly make its way out. But we've spent so much time as an event industry and so much money over the past 5 to 10 years making our events as green as possible. And I think we've all come a very long way with that. Part of what I'm interested in, and it's an ongoing conversation with myself and some other people in the industry, is what does it look like, the sustainability piece going forward? And what is the new normal in that, when I think people feel more comfortable having their own fresh, clean straw, or they can't touch their water bottle to the refillable stations. Those now have to be touchless. What does it look like for food vendors who have maybe used recyclable materials before, or reusable, come get your refill, now potentially are all composting, and what's the cost effect of those? So I think the new normal is looking a little less green in my mind for now, until I come up with some creative solutions. And then going forward, what does that mean as a financial impact for us as managers putting on these events budget-wise? So I think there's a new normal shift in what all of that piece looks like, in addition to your normal things that we all know that we're going to have to do with social distancing and masks.
Great insight. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I could jump on that. One thing that Allison mentioned was kind of sustainability. We're definitely going to see a retraction of the amount of sustainability efforts. One of the venues I'm working on is called the Climate Pledge Arena. It's going to be the first zero carbon arena in the world. So that opens up in a year, pretty much a year from today, hopefully. So we're going to have to take all the learnings that we're getting in the next few months, and hopefully the amount of innovation is out there to help bring us back to where we are, because the venues are going to zero carbon or sustainable as possible. And although this is going to be a step back, we still need to keep on moving forward, and the amount of technology that needs to be out there to move forward is going to be imperative to everything we're trying to do. When you look at the new type of venue and what's next, as I kind of mentioned, already the suites, but you're going to see the elimination of concession stands as you know it. All the venues I'm building right now and working on, we're transforming all of our concessions to what we call marketplaces. Think of a Hudson News when you go to the airport. So where you normally walk up, belly up right to a concession stand, ask the associate, for a hot dog or a hamburger or a bottle of water. Now you're walking inside of the concession stand. There's going to be hot food ready to go, made right in front of you. There's going to be a wall of beverage, and then there's going to be a ton of self-checkout POS, point of sale. So our goal is to move people around so they're not queuing up right behind each other. If you imagine 6 feet distance on a concourse, you can only get 4 or 5 people in some venues. So, it's definitely going to be a huge change in the way the consumers buy things. The other parts of the change is that now we're going away from cashless. So you're going to see more retail prices per se, opposed to, where everything was rounded up with taxes to like $8 or $7. You're going to see things at like $7.24 or $7.29, and tax will be added. So that's going to be another change as it relates to kind of the environment we see in the future because of the things that we're putting in, because of what we're seeing now. Our goal is to make sure that if this does happen again, any new venue can handle it so we don't have to keep on shutting down.
Can you also mention that Delaware North is an international company. Talk a little bit about the guest experience in, say, Europe once the pandemic reaches the other side.
Yeah, so with the European sports are a little bit different, especially in the UK as it relates to, what they call football, we call soccer, obviously. Their environments aren't really, COVID-proof at all. So you can't drink a beer while watching the pitch, which is the field. So the way UK football works, it's you go in after you go to the bar, you go in at the last minute, you go up to your stands, you watch the game, you don't have any alcohol in your hands. They have something called the Green Guide that basically limits the types of stuff you can serve, the way you can serve it. It goes back, to the late 70s on the reasonings why. But then at, halftime, everybody runs downstairs. They grab a beer or 4 beers or, 4 pints, and then they sit there and drink it. And then they have to drink it before they go back up and watch the match. So that's really not conducive. So, the leagues are looking at different ways to allow alcohol back into the stands because of those pinch points or, the mass gatherings on the concourse during play or during halftime. So we're going to see a huge shift, hopefully, inside of the service styles in the UK. And then as well as a lot of the UK business and European business and is going to become more American style, less touch points, less high-end service per se, and then more of like you get grabbing things yourself. So, in some of our venues we're really focusing on these marketplaces as well there.
Great, Ken. Thank you very much. Gwen or Marshall?
Sure. 2 things that come immediately to mind when you talk about what will be different. The first thing I think about is that during this time, obviously people, especially recording artists, have had to be really creative with the way that they have earned a living, as a lot of their income comes from live ticket sales. So I think that, people have been doing, Instagram streaming. They've been figuring out how to, sell tickets online virtually and do these type of concerts and things from their home. So I imagine that behavior in my mind is also going to stay when we talk about limited capacity inside of the actual arenas and venues across the country. So I can imagine a scenario where people are going to say, okay, could we fill the actual arena or the venue, only, 50% full or 30% full, and then maybe stream this out and then also be able to capture, that worldwide revenue that might come from a platform outside of the actual house of that actual venue. So that's one big thing I think is going to change. And then the second part that I'm a little bit fearful of, frankly, is the corporate support, which is the one thing we haven't really talked a little bit about here. But as COVID has hit everybody, pretty rough, obviously the venues depend on corporate sponsorship. So does the actual sports teams, as well as concerts and venues, around the world. We're all selling, stage sponsorships and, in space. And so I imagine that, unfortunately, I think there's going to be a little bit of pullback from the corporate side, especially the corporations organizations that have been hit hard throughout this pandemic, they're going to likely pull back their support from some of the things that they might see being these ancillary things. And I think one of the first budgets to go is marketing, unfortunately. So I think we're going to have to get creative and really be aggressive to target the corporations and companies that haven't been hit or that, have flourished throughout this time, like a platform like Zoom, who's tripled, and quadrupled their sales throughout this time. So.
Great. Marshall, thank you very much. Gwen, it seems like every day we hear new news about professional sports. This morning I read that the NFL looks like it's not going to play its preseason games. Baseball is ready to ramp up. There's talk about people leaving the NBA bubble. I know that you predominantly are in the NFL space, but talk about professional sports and, what's the new normal? Will ticket prices stay the same? Will they go up? Will they go down? What do you think?
Yeah, so if anyone watched the NFL draft, it was completely virtual, which was obviously a huge change from what it was supposed to be in Vegas, a giant party. That is a great example of, I think, the direction that the NFL and just teams in general, you're going to have to get really creative, to Marshall's point, with virtual events. And how do we give our season ticket holders the access, the exclusive VIP stuff that, that's how we sell them. How do we give that to them when we're taking away the biggest reason why they bought the tickets in the first place? So I think you're going to see a lot of virtual stuff just out of every team. They're going to do, players dropping in Zoom meetings. They're going to do any type of fan forum or call with a coach or the owner of the team, whoever you can get. But something that, when you think about, so NFL stadiums are obviously, you're talking usually at least 68, 70,000 people at a minimum. And if you're in one of these markets that has these diehard fan bases, like as most of you guys up in New England, obviously the Patriots, the Broncos, the Eagles, you have these venues that you have the entire stadium is basically season ticket owned, and the entire stadium is, the entire city completely supports and wants to be there. But we're kind of nervous. This guy, one of my marketing colleagues, brought up a good point. So obviously with us having either limited capacity or no fans, and that's where a lot of other teams will be too, people are going to get to experience the at-home experience, which is something we've already been battling. We've already been battling my couch is comfortable and my beer is cheap and my TV is very large. So we're a little nervous that, through this season that people could be like, the at-home experience isn't that bad. And ticket prices are high. To your last question about ticket prices, I think limited capacity is going to drive the ticket price way, way up. For any team that is fortunate enough to be in a position like us where the majority of your stadium is season ticket owned, for us it's 62,000 out of the 70. For us to only offer 7,000 seats a game, those are going to get gobbled up. You're going to get people who turn around and try to sell them for 4 times what we charge. So if a lot of stadiums are limited capacity, then I think you're going to see ticket prices just absolutely skyrocket. Whether or not the team sets those on the primary side, I don't know, but secondary will be very, very expensive.
Great insight, great information. Thank you very much. All right, so this is probably the most difficult question. We talked about this before. This is the last one before we get into questions from the audience. So you all have a crystal ball, and if you could look into it and think when your segment of the industry will return to full capacity, when do you think that is in terms of months? Everybody wants to know, when are we going to go back to normal sports and entertainment again? And anybody can start.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and start, because I think when we had talked about this prior, maybe I'm a little more on the pessimistic side of things, is I'm thinking over a year till we're back at full capacity. Or is there a shifting, because we're in outdoor festivals, there a shifting in shorter days and more days, longer days with some breaks in the music for cleaning, some shift in maybe what those days look like individually. But to get back to where we're only at 10,000, sports are much higher than that. I don't see enough of the compliance that's really required of getting these numbers back to where they need happening nationwide yet. And I think the states, each individual state's going to really dictate what those numbers are. Rhode Island right now only being at 250 people at an outdoor event, when we're looking at hopefully getting back to 10,000 by exactly a year from this coming weekend would have been Folk Weekend. So until I think the general public can do a little more on the compliance end of things, I think it's going to hold us back. And I'm saying more than a year until we're back at our beloved 10,000.
Great, thank you. Ken, you were going to jump in?
Yeah, so I'm more optimistic. I think hopefully it's really as it relates to a vaccine or a suppressant. I think it's more the suppressant than vaccine, because people aren't gonna jump at a quick, fast-paced vaccine as we would hope. So it's when we get a suppressant. I'm hoping by late January, February-ish, trying to open up for the MLB baseball season next year. I'm hoping that we'll kind of be back at regular capacity for sports. Not saying that we're going to have full capacity, sold out games. I think there's going to be other economic issues as it relates to disposable income that is going to affect our business. I also think there's going to be oversaturation of events going forward. So, if you look at all the concert tours and everything that's out there, everybody's just moving it to 2021, 2022, and then the normal shows that would normally happen are still going to happen. So I don't foresee the normal full capacity of what we had as an industry really coming for another year and a half. I think we'll be able to be open, but I think there's going to be other economic impacts to really affect our business, kind of what we saw in 2008, where disposable income kind of dried up.
Two interesting perspectives. Marshall, Gwen?
Go ahead, Gwen.
I just completely agree with basically everything that Ken just said. I'm hopeful that next season, 2021, we will be at, a welcoming, okay, all 70,000 seats are open. But to Ken's point, I don't think we're going to have 70,000 people in the building, either because some people, even with a vaccine or a suppressant, are just too nervous. They're in that high on what he mentioned about people's finances. NFL tickets are the most expensive ticket across the sports industry in this country. And if people don't have that disposable income, it is a luxury item at the end of the day, no matter how hardcore people are about their team. So I'm nervous about the financial impact, especially since obviously we do have so many seats and it is on the larger scale.
Thanks, Gwen. Marshall?
I actually feel pretty optimistic on this too, Allison. Sorry. But I actually think that, we're looking at, hopefully, the top of the year, I think things are going to try to start to, again, open back up and kind of get back to some regular routine. I do think, though, that again, we're going to end up changing. What does it mean about full capacity? And so I think that, again, we're going to start to figure out, how to be inventive and use, some outdoor spaces outside of the arenas, some fanplex areas, and do some social distancing stuff to try to pack in the numbers. And I'm actually not as worried about the ticket price part of it, because I get the point about disposable income, but I also think that it might, again, force, some of the teams in the arenas to, to look at reducing, cost during this time and just trying to cut some of the expenses by doing things a little bit different. So I think we'll come to a happy medium where everybody can be happy.
Great. Fantastic insight and information from all four of our panelists on what it'll look like to attend events after COVID-19 and what we can expect. What I'd like to do now, and I'm sure that they have sparked all kinds of questions and thoughts on many of you that are online right now. So let's get into some of the questions from some of you that are attending today. If you haven't already done so, please type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Liza Gentile, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations, to moderate the questions. Liza?
Thanks, Lee. So the first question is from Katie for Gwen. What kind of responses have you been getting from your season ticket holders? Are these account holders looking for refunds, canceling their accounts, and how are you handling these requests?
Yeah, so this is what we talk about in my department's morning meeting every single day. So we operate on PSLs, which stands for permanent seat license. The New England Patriots have them as well. The Eagles have them. A lot of teams with diehard fan bases have PSLs. If anyone's unfamiliar, basically what it means is you have to pay a one-time licensing fee for your physical seat. So you own that seat. You can then turn around, you can sell it on the internet, you can pass it down in your family for generations. We don't care what you do with it after you pay us. So that changes things for us compared to a team that just has season tickets on a season to season basis, because all of our people have paid this one-time fee at one point or another, whether it was last year or 25 years ago. So there's sort of an initial investment that goes with it. And so you have to renew your season tickets every year to maintain PSL ownership. So what we did this year because of COVID is we just deferred all season tickets to 2021. So you can allow the money that you already paid to roll over towards next year. You can ask for a refund for this year. We'll give you a refund back. But that's a refund just on this year's season tickets. That is not a refund on the PSL itself. So it's funny because PSLs have kind of, in our industry, they've gotten, so shall I say, less popular kind of. It's viewed as a barrier normally, but in a time like this, it's actually, it's insulating us a little bit from what's going on, because most of our people, they're just going to carry over the money towards next year. They were planning on renewing next year anyway. Or if they're trying to get out of their tickets, they turn around and they try to sell the PSL itself, which then we don't mind that at all, because if it sells to someone else, then that person's going to pay us the season ticket money. So PSL, as long as, if times are good, then a PSL sort of insulates your renewal percentage to always be pretty high, because it's putting the responsibility on the season ticket holder themselves to find a new owner rather than the team having to do that. That being said, we always have, every year, it doesn't matter. After we win the Super Bowl, you still have a few hundred seats that for whatever reason come back. So although our sales team isn't big, I'm only one of 3, we always still have a little inventory here and there to sell. And then we also sell group tickets and hospitality, which for this year are out the window. But as far as the season ticket perspective, we're hearing overwhelmingly great feedback. People are thrilled that we're, canceling this year basically and allowing them to just focus on their finances with other things. And we're just rolling over towards 2021 already, basically.
Thanks, Gwen. The next question is, can anyone speak to what conventions and trade shows might look like?
I can take this one. So a lot of the conversation that we've been having as a corporate meeting planning team, or with other people in the industry and hotel staff as well, is the need for more space for a smaller number of people. So every single person that is attending an event, they'll now factor in roughly those 6 feet, whether you're in your classroom meeting space for your breakouts, you're in general session space in more of a theater style, or attending meals as well. The amount of money a hotel makes is truly based off the people that are there. You're paying per person for food, you're paying for these larger spaces, but companies most likely won't be able to support what that financial impact is of having fewer people and needing to rent more space. So the shift is going to be in potentially day meetings when possible. I think virtual is going to really stick for corporate meetings, because some of these meetings are, a $3 or $4 million spend in just a few days to get their sales force ready to go out and tackle the season, primarily in the first quarter of the year. Meals, of course, we've talked about higher end boxed options, or doing your cocktail hours or your networking events with like individual cheese plates, individual boxed meals, not hosting those meals at those larger events, because the numbers are going to be in the thousands. And what does that look like? And then, adding the amount of hotel or convention center staff to keep up with the cleaning, to keep up the serving of those boxes versus, whereas you could put out 25 double-sided buffets and feed 3,000 people, it won't be the same anymore. You'll have to be served that food, or it will be pre-boxed. So there's a lot of shifts there, and they all go back to keeping people separate, but also in a very fixed space. Hotels can't add what they don't already have without millions of dollars from constructions and years to accomplish it. So.
Thanks, Allison. The next question is from Colleen. Since most of you think things will open sooner than later, do you think the general public will be ready to go to these large events?
I could take that one. I definitely think so. There's even like conferences and conventions that are actually happening right now. There's actually one that's been this entire week. A really big one. It's the state of Georgia Police Chiefs Association. Their state convention. I was surprised to see that they did not cancel it at all. It's actually happening in Savannah, Georgia this week, and tons of folks that I know have actually attended the event. And so I think that what we're going to also see is, again, the fatigue all around the whole COVID crisis. I think that people are, frankly, going to get tired of staying in their houses. They're going to get tired of, being at home, working virtually, and they're going to look to try to get back to some sense of what normal life used to look like. And it just may be risky, but it is for their own sanity at this point. And so I do think, again, that that's the shift that we're going to start to see, people actually doing normal things.
I know I mentioned earlier about my marketing colleague who's very nervous that the at-home experience will all of a sudden, we'll have all these people who are like, oh, who wants to go to the stadium? Personally, I am very optimistic that people are going to miss the energy that they feel at an NFL game, at really any exciting sporting event. I mean, think about any playoff game you've ever been to. So I personally think people will come running back. That's my hope, at least. So we'll see.
I think you saw that kind of with the NASCAR in Bristol, and then this weekend in Texas. People are going out and attending. I think Bristol, they had 20,000 in attendance, and they're supposed to have somewhere between 25 and 30 from the last update I got for Texas. So I think people are willing to go out. It's just going to feel different at the beginning.
And as a follow-up to that question, there is another question. The majority of you seem hopeful for near future occupancy in your facilities. Are any of your agencies or companies actively promoting public health now to curb current infection and promote sooner return to in-person events?
I think I can take this one. Our company owns the Boston Bruins and TD Garden, and the things that they're trying to do as relates to different design and construction, and things that I'm trying to do with the other 64 teams. We're basically trying to focus on what we can do to implement going forward to make sure that when we do open, there's not additional outbreaks, whether it's masks, whether it's plexiglass, whether it's the touch points, as well as understanding that everybody's gonna be wearing face masks, and how does that affect the type of event and the type of guest experience that you have with eating and everything else. So we're looking at all those options, all those things to make sure that, as we move forward, people will keep on coming back. People may only come back once and then decide it's not for them, but, we want people to keep on coming back. Plus, we don't want to be in the same situation we were, a couple of years on the road. This isn't the first pandemic that happened. It's one of the first ones in a long time that happened to the United States, but, you look at MERS and SARS and kind of what they had in South Korea in 2009 and kind of where they are now, they were more prepped for something like this to happen because of the stuff they implemented after 2009, 2010. So I think we're going to learn a lot from it. We've already learned a lot, and every day we keep learning more that will help us impact the future to make sure that we can continue to operate in the type of environment we're in right now.
Thanks, Ken. For the event professionals who've been laid off due to COVID-19, what is your recommendation for getting back on track with a career in events? The job opportunities within events seem extremely limited currently.
I I'll take that one. This might not be the most traditional advice that I'll give, but I will say that, you know, people that work in events are likely I have found some of the best project managers and folks that I have worked with who have a set of skills that are really unique, and they transcend just from working in hospitality or just from working in events. And so I would encourage folks like that during this time to really think through, you know, and look for other opportunities as maybe a project manager or a program manager at an organization that you could do, even if it's on a temporary basis for another organization until things start to open back up within the actual sports and entertainment industry. But I would definitely say that, again, the set of skills and things that people have, those that have taken this trek throughout Johnson & Wales, I think, again, are very skillful. And I think that you can do a lot of different things. You just got to figure out how you market yourself to do something a little bit different during this time.
And I'd like to add too, I know myself as I'm looking through what my potential next few months would look like and talking to friends in the industry who have also lost their jobs for now, I'm encouraging them, and the conversation with us has been an opportunity to maybe try something new or experience something that you've always maybe been kind of secretly interested in and not had an opportunity to go forth and experience. So whatever that may mean, because Marshall's absolutely right. The creativity, the logistical minds, the ability to handle stress really gives people in our industry this incredible opportunity to excel in just about any different industry. But I would choose ones right now that you're going to get something out of and look back and say, I'm so glad I got to experience that. And you really have to think, look inward to what that would be for you, and chase that for now until we can all get back a little more to normal.
I don't think that, you know, there's a lot of money behind sports, and sports is a huge, you know, economic driver for many cities. And there's a lot of people behind it. You know, if you think about a football stadium, 3,000-4,000 people who just work at the venue on top of everything else that goes into the venue. So at the end of the day, sports and facilities and, you know, venues aren't going to be dried up for jobs. Right now, we're currently in a we'll say a hiccup. So most people in sporting facilities have been, you know, furloughed or laid off, but the jobs aren't going to be gone forever. So one thing I would say is definitely hang in there. You know, we'll be back, and we'll be back, you know, stronger than ever. And, you know, the jobs will be there very soon.
Great. So we have a question from Colleen. What does staff training look like moving forward? How will staff be trained to deal with attendees who do not want to follow new policies and procedures?
So, and I can answer that one first. So in ticketing, obviously we're sort of the front lines a lot of times for guests. And then we also have a guest experience department. So the two of us work hand in hand to try to rectify complaints and deal with all the normal customer service stuff that I'm sure everybody on this call has had to deal with, which we all know can be sometimes the hardest part of the job. So we are going to have, even when, like, let's say if next year we're still in a position where we're doing limited capacity, but hopefully more than 7,000, we might need to have more police officers on hand though, because as everyone knows, NFL games have a little bit of a reputation to get rowdy. It's definitely a heavy drinking place. You can't drink with your mask on. So it's going to be really challenging. And we've already started having these conversations with our guest experience department of, okay, like, what does this look like when we try to enforce social distancing? What does it look like when somebody refuses to pick their mask up because they're just chugging beers the whole game? I think that it's going to be really, really challenging, which is why limited capacity is, I think, the answer before you obviously just try to go for the full. I don't know what stadium would want to go for full capacity right now, but I'm sure there's some who are trying to do it. So I think it's going to be, in terms of training staff and game day staff, especially the ones who, you know, they don't necessarily, they're there for a paycheck usually. It's not usually a passion like it is for most people who work full-time in sports. It's going to take a lot of training, a lot of time, and a lot of de-escalation training to get them ready to handle guests who do not want to comply with the new rules.
Thanks, Gwen. We have a couple of questions about virtual events, so I'm going to combine those into one. So do you feel that the growing trend of virtual events will lead to a new world of fewer face-to-face gatherings? And also, are you all being encouraged to pivot to virtual events? And what are your thoughts on the virtual event fatigue that seems to be happening right now?
Well, I personally think most virtual events suck. That's just the God honest truth. So I actually think that, again, I think we are going to pivot, though, to having those. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it's just going to be a matter of how can you incorporate the virtual experience along with the actual experience that is happening there and under the rooftop of an arena. So I think that we'll just likely start to see a combination of both, because, again, capacity, as we all talked about, and we pretty much all agreed, the panelists, that capacity is going to start to be the challenge. That's going to be the issue. They're going to start to limit the amount of people that you can have in that roof. So now how can you still capture an amount of revenue by producing the same event? You've already got the same production costs. You've got the same artist or talent fee, or, the same event cost that it takes to put on the actual event. So now how can we bring in more revenue for the same activity that's happening already?
I agree. If anything, it did prove that there's some things that came out of COVID that were not all bad. And the pivot to going to some of these virtual events gave people a little bit of the type of experience that they were hoping to have this summer, and will continue to in some way with some of these artists doing performances from home or doing them in empty stages, and being able to at least still see that. But of course, we're not in the business of social distancing. We are in the business of creating these wonderful experiences and these memories for fans, and people are going to certainly want to come to those. The amount of events that's going to happen is only going to continue to grow as people feel safe. But I think what the virtual thing did is prove that you can do both, like Marshall said, and it can be successful. It's kind of like how some of these schools are saying, there's never going to be another snow day, because now we know virtual learning works to whatever degree it does, and that they can use those days now and get kids out of school a little earlier, because that's another option. So I think now it'll be more of a double whammy, like Marshall said, but also not fewer, because people want to get back, and that's what we do. We put on experiences, and people want that experience.
Esports for virtual events have just taken off. That's a huge growth market inside of the sports entertainment world, and because of the situation we're in, e-gaming and esports are just on fire right now. So that's one thing I think works very well virtually, but that's going to come out post-COVID stronger than ever, more than we've seen, and it was already on a super fast trajectory, and now it just exploded since it started happening.
So we have a question, given the reopening guidelines and restrictions that differ from state to state, do you foresee a shift in where in-person corporate meetings and events, concerts, etc. are hosted in the near future in the United States? Or even foresee this as a possible decision factor or consideration for 2021 planning?
I think in the convention world, there's probably 10 ginormous convention venues that people are still kind of going to flock to, whether it's McCormick or Orange County in Florida. People are still going to go to those venues, even though if they may be a hotbed or not, due to the amount of space. So I think that it could be based on space more than kind of the climate around.
We have time for a couple more questions. So we have one from Rita. When it comes to food and beverage at events, as discussed, self-service buffets probably will not be offered. And will there be a need to increase in staff members trained on sanitation and food handling measures? Will these extra steps and layers of caution, will they be bringing added cost to food and beverage? And what are some cost-effective solutions for effectively handling food and beverage at events?
Yeah, so I think that in the near term, it's really not going to add the added cost, because we look at things as the nice to haves and the normal operating procedures. So, the 2-foot long hot dog, the boomstick dog, or the pizza burger that we've really always focused on to bring attention to media, we're probably going to pair away from. So there's a lot of money that goes into things that we actually don't sell to the masses. It's just like a niche product. Now that we go back to kind of a core business, which is, your beer, your soda, popcorn, hot dogs, pretzels, we're going to be saving some money in that aspect and, putting towards training and everything else. And, we're going to be adjusting our training too. So we've always been training. The training is going to be adjusted. So there's some wages that are incorporated into different training that we're going to be doing. So in the near term, I don't foresee any huge price increases. Plus, on the food and beverage side, most of the food and beverage is contracted services through, the ownership of a team, and the ownerships and team and the food service providers are working really well together to make sure that when we open these venues, we don't shy people away because of the economy.
I completely agree with Ken. I don't think at our festivals we'll see much of an increase in food and beverage prices. The food trucks will be the food trucks, the food vendors will be the food vendors. But I think as you look to corporate events, based in hotels, potentially based in convention centers, when you start to individualize things or package things or plate things, that's where the expense has always gone up, and will continue to, I imagine. But that being said, those different venues in some way will have to adjust because they're going to end up pricing themselves out of the ability to do events at their venue, if that's the case, if it stayed on the trajectory of what that pricing looks like now, and then adding kind of these COVID-like fees to them. But anytime you have to hand roll, hand package, hand box something, there's always a price tag with that we could see grow, and hopefully the adjustments on the venues end to make that affordable for clients to still come and do these large scale meetings.
Great. One question, are any of you doing anything special right now for your partners, season ticket holders, sponsors, to create any kind of special experience for them?
For us, and this is some stuff we actually typically do even pre-COVID, but we're going to ramp it up a lot more. One thing that's really worked well for us to keep our PSL owners engaged is we do fan forums. So it's a private line. We use a system where people like me and my other colleagues will be screening questions, and then we'll have Steve Bisciotti, our owner, or our head coach, John Harbaugh, or we were able to get Lamar Jackson before he was NFL MVP to do one of these calls. So whether it's players or whatever, people will call in and they'll get to ask questions kind of live on the air in front of all the other PSL owners, basically. And that's obviously something that that is so easy to do in COVID times, and a lot of people are at home and have more time. So we're gonna ramp that up for sure. And I think we also have a rewards program like most teams. Ours, though, is completely random. It's not a point system. We just randomly select accounts based on criteria and award them with prizes. The most popular prizes are usually game day prizes, being able to go down on the field, or being able to have a VIP experience at training camp, all stuff that we can't do right now. So in terms of material prizes, we're going to have to get creative, whether it's framed jerseys, autographed footballs, whether it's a private phone call with we have a player who will Zoom with you. We're going to definitely have to get really creative with keeping people engaged. And that really rings true, especially for the teams that aren't necessarily in the best team performance side of things. If your team is struggling and you can't have fans at the game, how do you keep those people engaged? Teams like that are going to be in a really tough spot here for until whenever the next season is, so you're going to see a lot of virtual events. I hope people don't get tired of them, because we'll be doing a lot, I'm sure.
And we have one last question. What advice do you have for recent graduates from the SEAM program?
I think so as much as it's like doom and gloom for people who are graduating right now, one thing that I think is true, at least with my network, is professionals now have more time than they've probably had in years to have a phone call with you, do an informational interview via Zoom or whatever it is. Don't hesitate to reach out to people on LinkedIn or through a friend of a friend and set up that time, because I know personally in our office, we all have a lot more time on our hands than we would normally at this point in the season. So try to take advantage of that. I know people always say networking on these things, but now really is a great time because so many professionals have a lot more time on their hands.
I totally agree with Gwen. I think networking is the word you hear most at Johnson & Wales. And the second layer to that is you can continue in some ways to get more experience. Sure, you may need a paying job to keep you occupied until this pandemic kind of settles down and we're all back to our normal business. But things like I started volunteering at the farmer's market on the weekend. I have never in my life had the summers or the Saturdays to do that, but it's set up. It's people management, it's working through the COVID regulations as they stand now, and then breaking down. So it's still that kind of live event experience, whether it's a farmer's market, whether it's working at a restaurant and learning to deal with people in that way with COVID, or some of these events that are popping up in smaller, or getting involved in the virtual events. It's all experience that just coming out of school you may not have on the same level. And I think all of that's still very valuable. Even if the big contracts and all of that aren't quite there yet.
I'd also say that during this time, another thing to do for the recent grads is to also think through, again, the ways of the entrepreneurship, spirit part of it right now. I think that, again, everybody, as you can hear, is kind of stuck in a little bit of a situation about, hey, what are we going to do right now? Who's going to be the thought leader behind this? Who's going to step up and lead the way and come out with some industry standard things that everybody in the entire industry can follow? And so I'd encourage everybody to kind of dig into their creative hats and think through, maybe you have an idea, or maybe you're sitting on a solution that could be a solve for everybody, in the industry right now.
But I also think that look at things that kind of set you apart. So currently right now, in the environments, we're going to open slower than we would expect. So, once we start going full bore, there's going to be a lot of job openings. So, look at it that way. What can you do to set yourself apart from somebody else that may be in that same position? We're also going to see a lot of people retire from our business and kind of go, if you look at kind of what the housing market in 2008 did, a ton of people left real estate. And then now, in 2012, 2013, when we started again with the real estate boom, a lot of people who were never in real estate started getting in, and they're very successful now. So, whatever you can set yourself apart, work on what you can set yourself apart from now. It's definitely going to be used in a few months.
Thank you all. I know there are some questions we did not get to. We have saved those, and we will connect with the panelists afterwards and try to send you the answer to your question via email. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Lori Zabata.
Thanks, Liza. Thank you, Professor Esckilsen, and our panelists for such an informative and interesting discussion about what we can expect from events, both large and small, in the future. We're grateful to you for sharing your time with us today and appreciate your insight on this topic. It was such a great discussion. Thank you. In such an unprecedented time, it's impressive to hear how you've all been working to chart your course for the future. And thank you to all of our alumni attendees today. We know the past few months haven't been easy, but hopefully you found today's session informative and helpful. We've all felt the effects of the pandemic, and Johnson & Wales is no exception. The university was able to limit the disruption to students by quickly pivoting to remote learning, but many students continue to experience unforeseen challenges affecting their ability to complete their degrees and pursue their goals. Technology needs, unexpected expenses, and financial hardships threaten many students' ability to continue their studies at JWU, which is why we've established the JWU Emergency Fund to provide direct and immediate assistance to our Wildcats. If you're in a position to give back today, please consider making a gift of any amount using the link in the chat window. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed today's session, attending events after COVID-19, What to Expect, part of the JWU Connects family of programming. Through JWU Connects, alumni can engage in informative and interesting discussions related to professional development topics, as well as opportunities for networking and connection with fellow classmates and faculty. For the full listing of upcoming events, including next week's regional virtual networking and Sip with JWU virtual rosé tasting, please visit our events calendar at alumni.jwu.edu. We appreciate your attendance today and wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists again. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.